I never imagined that the quietest day of my life would be my husband Raoul's funeral. As everyone wept around his casket, my hands trembled as I received a mysterious note that would change everything. Don't trust anyone in your own house. My name is Lydia. I'm 72 years old, and what I'm about to tell you now isn't just the story of a grieving widow. It's the confession of a woman who discovered that the heaviest silence doesn't come from death, but from the betrayals hidden among those you yourself created. Get ready, because what happened within my family was so cruel that to this day I wonder, how did I have the strength to survive? I never thought the quietest day of my life would have so many people talking at once. My husband Raul Noguera's wake felt like a theater of whispers, footsteps that didn't touch the ground, handkerchiefs that didn't dry anything, hugs that stopped 2 fingers width from the body. The chill of the São Bento do Vale cemetery room seeped into my bones like someone asking for permission and waiting for no response. I, in a black dress that had seen other goodbyes, adjusted my crooked necklace and sat on the wooden bench that still smelled of varnish. He deserved a backyard, not this box, I thought, lacking the courage to say. Silence on the outside, a storm within. The coffin's color didn't suit Raoul, too much polish, too little history. He was a man of living wood, the kind with veins, knots, and scars. I stared at his still profile and searched for the stubborn wrinkle at the corner of his eye, the one that appeared whenever he challenged me to dance a bolero in the kitchen. I couldn't find it. I kept picking through memories like picking beans, separating the good from the bad, blowing away the dust of memory. The scent of flowers mixed with hand sanitizer made my stomach churn. Breathe, Lydia, I whispered to myself, as if I were a girl about to recite in front of the school. I breathed. The air came in short gasps. Davi and Tomas, our boys, were on the other side, lined up like someone posing for a photo at a building inauguration. Expensive suits, dry faces, discreet phone calls. Davi tapped his cell phone with the haste of an executive. Tomas imitated his brother even in the way he crossed his arms. I tried to guess what they were thinking. Homesickness? Bureaucracy? Numbers? When Bianca, Davi's wife, leaned against me, her perfume too sweet, and said, "You need to rest," I felt the urge to reply, "Rest from what?" From the life they ripped from me by the roots. Instead, I gave a half-smile of a polite widow. I'm from a different school. It was then that I felt my cell phone vibrate inside my bag, insistent, disobedient to grief. An unknown number. I considered not answering. Curiosity has a time to wreak havoc. But my finger was quicker than prudence. I opened the message and read it slowly, syllable by syllable, like when I learned to decipher prescriptions. I'm alive. That's not me there. Don't trust our children. The bench slipped from under my legs for a moment. I blinked, and the letters remained on the screen. Cold, absurd, like a badly told joke in the middle of a wake. My heart, that old drum, missed a beat. I closed the bag with a snap that seemed too loud. I looked around to see if anyone had seen me tremble. No one. The world moved to the wrong beat. A priest murmuring ready-made consolation, a chorus of my condolences, people unsure of where to put their hands. I ran my finger under my eye to catch a tear that hadn't fallen. I wrote back. Who are you? Where's Raoul? I deleted it. I rewrote. If this is a joke, God forgive you. I deleted it again. Finally, I sent only. Who? The reply came before my second breath. I can't say. They're watching. They. The word hammered like a drop on a tile. My mind went straight to the workshop. Raoul's workbench always had a designated place for everything. 10-inch wrench to 10-inch wrench, screw to screw, sandpaper by weight, the carpenter's pencil always tucked behind his ear. I thought about breakfast 3 days ago, when he'd said in a tired voice, "Does this sugar taste like medicine?" And I laughed. You're just obsessed, man. My laugh returned as a snarl. We laugh at a lot of things when we don't want to cry. The clock on the wall, the one with the motor oil commercial, ticked half a minute inside me. I watched my children like someone looking at a crooked painting and couldn't find the nail. Davi leaned his head close to Tomas and whispered something that ended with "everything's fine," and I couldn't tell if it was about flower crowns, insurance paperwork, or whatever else can be sorted out in silence. "Mom, do you need water?" Thomas asked, his eyes like glass, his voice like an elevator. "I can get water," I replied, and was surprised by my firmness. I remembered when he fell off his bike and I blew on his scraped knee. "It'll go away." It goes away, but it leaves a mark. Some things we only see when we rub them away. The priest called my name. I stood up, as if lifting one's own story from the ground. I said little. "I thanked them for coming," said Raoul had hands that taught the world how to be useful, and that his honesty fit in a box of screws. If it opened, it would splatter in the face of anyone nearby. Someone laughed nervously. I couldn't finish, so I finished anyway, with the sentence missing a chunk, as sentences that matter do. When I sat down, the message burned in my pocket, and it wasn't my phone. It was the idea of the impossible. If it wasn't Raoul in that coffin, who slept there that last night, the room filled with stories that didn't belong to me. He was a good man. He will be missed. May God comfort him. I wanted to run out, cross the long hallway, burst into the workshop, open drawers, smell the mugs, check the coffee grounds, peek under the rug. I wanted to go back 2 weeks and pay attention to that medicinal taste that remained unanswered. I wanted to ask why Davi was so interested in papers that had always belonged to Raoul and me. I wanted to, but I stayed. Because well-behaved widows stay. And because running away from pain teaches nothing, it only postpones the reckoning. Bianca's hand rested on my shoulder with the care of an actress. "You look pale, Lydia." Pale? I was different. The message, which wouldn't leave me, began to multiply in possibilities. Someone playing with a hot iron with my heart. Someone warning me of the precipice I'd always danced on the edge of without realizing it. Or Raoul himself, alive, hidden in some fold of our history that I couldn't see. I thought about the way he tied his apron, the way he counted the change in his head, the way he craved a leak that became music. A man like that disappears like that? Disappears, and that's it? He doesn't. The farewell was too short, too practical, too economical, like a purchase made at the grocery store, not a life ending. The simpler, the more like the father, I heard Tomas say, and felt the phrase like a splinter under my fingernail. Simple isn't rushed. Simple isn't distracted. Simple isn't without witness. I wanted my friends from the workshop, Mr. Adalberto from the warehouse, Zay's laughter from the tire shop, the whole city smelling of sawdust. Instead, there was a hastily passed paper, a waiting car, a clock that brooked no delays. The haste of the living has always frightened me more than the stillness of the dead. When I saw the attendant closing the coffin, the wood sang a low groan that only I heard. I closed my eyes to capture the sound. And with my eyes closed, I saw another scene. Me crossing the street from home, my hands still wet from the dishes, Raoul with his back to me, fiddling with something I didn't recognize, a random jar near the stove, a bitter smell that wasn't coffee. I opened my eyes suddenly. The world was in the same place, as if it were possible. I clutched my bag to my chest. Inside, a secret flickered. And suddenly I realized the silence of that day was just the first sentence of a story that hadn't begun in the cemetery. The ground slipped a foot from under my feet, as if someone had pulled the rug out from under me without asking permission. I took a shallow breath, feeling the metallic taste of saliva, the same as when I was nervous before presenting a project at the boys' school. "I'm alive. Don't trust them." The words repeated inside me, like a hammer on a sheet of zinc. The priest continued talking about eternal life, and there I was, clinging to a very concrete life with a CPF Brazilian Social Security number, an ID card, and the smell of sawdust. My hand trembled. My body knew before my head. Something wasn't adding up. I looked at Raoul's face one last time, searching for signs the makeup couldn't hide. The hidden mole near his sideburn, the subtle vein in his neck, the old speck of dust in his ear that I kept asking him to remove. I couldn't find it. It gave me the feeling of being late for the bus and seeing the dust rising. Mom, Davi approached, his round voice like someone who's practiced this phrase at other tables. Do you want me to fix the rest?
The rest.
As if pain came with an instruction manual. The message burned in my bag. I pressed my fingers against the fabric, as if pressing the panning button would resolve the detail. Tomas came up behind me with a glass of water that glistened in the cold light. Drink, Mom. I drank. The water ran down in a square, scraping away memories. I returned 2 weeks ago without meaning to, Raoul leaning back in the kitchen chair, hand on his stomach, whispering that the coffee had a medicinal quality. I laughed to dispel the cloud.
Yeah.
Some laughs turn into whirlwinds later. And we fall. Bianca brought up the flower crown like someone talking about new curtains. The white one is lighter. It matches his essence. Essence? Raoul smelled of machine oil, of cut wood, of bar soap at the end of the day. I stared at the gray floor to remember I was still there. My body has its tricks. When the world disappears, I count the stripes on the marble and find direction. 1, 2, 3. On the 4th, I heard my phone vibrate again. I hid my shock with a sigh. Who are you? I typed with a tense thumb, each letter a nail. I can't say it right now. Just trust me, it's not him. I read it out loud in my head to see if it sounded absurd enough for me to throw out. But it went down smoothly, like an ancient truth we'd avoided out of politeness. I looked around, searching for cameras, eyes, traps. They're watching. Who? My boys? The word came like a bite. I wanted to deny it quickly, like someone closing a window at the first drop of rain. Denying protects, until it doesn't protect anymore. The priest asked me to come closer. I walked. The coffin seemed larger, the wood more distant. I touched the edge, cold, smooth, impersonal, and whispered a "forgive me" that even I didn't understand. Forgive what? What didn't I see? What didn't I want to see? What might be happening that I still don't have the courage to name? Behind me, measured steps.
Davi.
We thought we'd take care of the insurance paperwork today, Mom. Make it easier. Insurance. A word that always sounded like an umbrella to me. In that moment, it became a sharp-edged knife. My stomach churned politely. It didn't vomit, but it did warn me. I went to the cemetery bathroom, the smell of chlorine giving me back some of my bearings. I stared in the mirror and found the woman I was at 30, squeezing beads and stretching the beans, promising myself I'd raise 2 good men. And did I? The question rang out and returned unanswered. I remembered Raoul's notes posted in the workshop. I'll be right back, get nails. Don't forget Dona Teresa's change, and realized I hadn't seen any of them in days. When had they disappeared? I went out and found Tomas on a mumbled call. Yes, today? I'll tell you later. He saw me and hung up quickly, with the smile of a salesman selling expensive things. I was talking to the notary, Mom. Notary offices don't whisper like that. The icy wind pierced my blouse. The message on my phone became as heavy as a brick. Courage asked for permission. Son, why are you in such a hurry? He shrugged. Better get it over with. Get it over with. As if it were the day's cash. As if it were a wood lot. My heart understood the message before my mind accepted it. Davi surrounded the conversation with the care of someone who surrounds a shy animal. You know the workshop is no longer viable. We can turn it into something productive. Productive. Another beautiful word that, in the wrong mouth, becomes dirty. I felt my hand tingle, the same sensation I had when I signed our deed on the 2-room house, a lifetime ago. There, tingling was hope. Here it was alarm. We'll talk about this later, I said, pushing the agenda toward a hallway where I could see exits. We returned to our chairs, and the ritual continued like a river that knows its stones. But not me. I was off track, hunting footprints on the polished floor. The phone vibrated again. Go to the workshop. Under the third drawer. Third drawer. I closed my eyes and saw the workbench. Hammer, tape measure, pencil. Drawers numbered Raoul style. The third one always stuck. The blow to the stomach became a map. And I understood that morning would have to wait a while. Because some questions don't tolerate a wake.
They want a key. And a secret.
The workshop had always been Raoul's kingdom, a place that smelled of grease, sawdust, and sweat. There he spent hours, as if time didn't exist, creating, repairing, and keeping secrets I never dared ask about. After the funeral, I returned home and couldn't sleep. The silence in the room weighed more heavily than any grief. I picked up the set of keys on the table, and that rusty key, which always opened the workshop door, seemed to beckon me. I held it tightly, feeling as if Raoul were still there, guiding me. I walked slowly to the workshop gate, my heart hammering in my chest. The cold dawn wind stirred my memories like ancient dust. When I inserted the key into the lock, it turned with difficulty, as if protesting my presence. As I opened it, a breath of air tinged with rust and damp would envelop me. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to absorb the last essence of that man I loved so much. It was as if Raoul had left his very soul there. The walls were covered with tools, each hanging from crooked nails, like aging soldiers from a forgotten war. I remembered the nights he'd come home with his hands stained with oil, saying that the workshop was a man's place. I never insisted on entering. I respected his space. But that night, I wasn't just a widow. I was a woman searching for answers. The enigmatic message and the memory of the third drawer gave me courage, even if it was tinged with fear. My eyes scanned the counter until they found the old iron dresser Raoul always used to store his most valuable things. The first two drawers opened easily. In the first, I saw screws, nuts, and washers jumbled together in complete disarray. In the second, only a rusty hammer and a greasy rag. The third, the one I had been so mysteriously shown, resisted. I pulled once, twice, 3 times, until it finally gave way with a sharp snap that echoed like a scream trapped in time. Inside the drawer, I found a neatly folded manila envelope, almost hidden beneath a loose board. My heart raced, and my hands trembled as I touched it. The paper felt warm, as if it had a life of its own. I glanced around, afraid I was being watched, and then opened the envelope. Out fell a few documents, bank statements, old prescriptions, and a letter. When I saw the handwriting, my legs went weak. It was Raoul's handwriting, unmistakable, with its crooked RS and the ink stains he always left on the paper. I sat down on the old wooden chair and, with bated breath, began to read. If you're reading this, Lydia, it's because something happened to me that I can't control. Don't trust the boys. They know more than they let on. I stopped right there, unable to continue for a few seconds. The ground seemed to give way beneath my feet. Raoul, distrusting his own sons? It was an absurd idea, too painful to accept. But at the same time, it made sense. For years I'd sensed secrets in their eyes, conversations interrupted when I entered the room. I continued reading with sweaty palms. Raoul spoke of strange money movements, unexpected visitors, and a feeling of being betrayed in his own home. Each word was a stab in my heart. I wanted to believe it was the product of a sick man's paranoia, but the clarity of the sentences left me breathless. It was as if Raoul had written in a hurry, aware that time was slipping away. I felt that, somehow, he knew what was coming. I closed the letter carefully, clutching it to my chest. A mixture of pain, indignation, and fear washed over me. Could my children, the ones I'd raised with such sacrifice, be involved in something so sordid? I still had no proof, just words scrawled on paper. But I knew Raoul like no one else. He wouldn't write that without reason. The shadows of the workshop, once so familiar, now seemed menacing, as if every corner held silent witnesses to a crime I still didn't understand. I stood up slowly, put the letter back in the envelope, and slammed the drawer shut. The workshop was no longer a safe place. It was a vault of dangerous secrets. Before leaving, I ran my hand over the bench where Raoul usually sat, and a tear ran down my face. I felt anger, a new anger, against life, against fate, and perhaps against my own children. But above all, I felt an obligation to see it through. The truth was there, and I could no longer ignore it. When I closed the door and returned home, the key weighed like a hot iron in my pocket. The early morning chill no longer bothered me, because something greater burned within me, the certainty that my morning wouldn't be just about crying and remembering, but about investigating and confronting. Raoul had left me a mission, and I wouldn't rest until I understood what really happened. For the first time in days, I felt not just like a widow, but like the guardian of a secret that could change everything. The house that once throbbed with voices, laughter, and even trivial arguments now felt like a tomb. Each room held a heavy, almost suffocating silence, as if the walls absorbed the pain and returned it in the form of an oppressive stillness. My children, who had always been talkative, were strangely subdued. There was no comfort, no shared memories of their father, only a calculated silence. And it was in this silence that I noticed the first fissure. Sometimes, what's left unsaid is precisely what screams the loudest. In the first few nights after the funeral, I expected to hear them talking about Raoul, telling childhood stories, reminiscing about his quirks. But instead, what I heard were shuffling footsteps and hastily closed doors. It was as if they were avoiding talking about something in front of me, as if they were carrying a truth that couldn't be revealed. This silence wasn't mourning, it was complicity. And this complicity, more than any tears, wounded me deeply. I also noticed how they looked away when I stared at them for too long. One of them was fiddling with his phone. The other pretended to be focused on anything, from a newspaper to the switched-off television. Raoul always said that silence is a universal language, and I finally understood what he meant. Their silence accused me, warned me, and I could no longer ignore it. One night, I went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Before I turned on the light, I heard hurried whispers. The voices were low, barely audible, but I recognized the urgent tone of my children. When I opened the door, the silence returned like a wall. They looked at each other and changed the subject, feigning casualness. But they didn't know I'd already heard enough to fuel my suspicions. Their silence was selective. When they were together, they spoke in low tones, murmured, and exchanged long glances. But when I entered, the silence fell like a veil. Raoul always told me to trust my instincts, and in that moment, my intuition screamed louder than any rational explanation. Something was being hidden from me, and silence was the key to this invisible door. I began to notice small details. The disturbed drawers, the safe that previously only Raoul could open now appeared with key scratches, papers mysteriously disappearing from the desk. Every detail reinforced the feeling that a silent plot was unfolding before my eyes. Morning became a curtain, and behind it lurked something darker. There were times when I felt watched in my own home. Light footsteps in the hallway at night, shadows crossing my bedroom door, muffled whispers followed by sudden silence. The silence, paradoxically, produced a noise within me, an internal rumbling that kept me awake. I no longer wept just for Raoul's absence, but for the fear of being surrounded by deadly secrets. I even tested that silence. I deliberately let loose phrases like, "Raoul left me something important," or "One day the truth will come out." At those moments, I noticed my children's bodies stiffen, their breathing change. They didn't respond, just remained quiet, but that silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. It was a silent confession that there was something rotten behind my husband's death. Even the everyday noise disappeared. The radio, which had always been on in the kitchen, remained off. The clinking of cutlery became almost non-existent. Even the trivial conversations about everyday life disappeared. Silence reigned, but not as a consolation. It reigned like a stern judge, imposing an invisible sentence that I needed to decipher. It was then that I understood that silence was a strategy. It wasn't mourning, it wasn't respect, it was fear. Fear that I would discover something. Fear that Raoul had said more than he should have before he died. Fear that the truth would emerge. Their silence spoke, and I heard every word hidden between pauses and glances. Raoul was right. Something was wrong, and I wouldn't rest until I broke this pact of silence. It was dawn when I went down to the kitchen, my heart heavy and my mind racing. I turned on the soft light over the sink, and there, alone, sat Raoul's crystal glass. The same glass he used every night before bed, like a silent ritual. It seemed to glow strangely, as if drawing my attention to something I should see. At that moment, I felt a pang in my chest. That simple object could hold a deadly secret. I approached slowly, as if fearing I'd find more than I bargained for. I touched the glass and noticed a stain at the bottom, a milky shade that wouldn't come off easily. I grabbed the sponge and scrubbed, but it didn't disappear immediately. Then a memory flashed through my mind. Raoul had complained of a bitter taste in his final days, but he said it was just the medicine. My heart raced. What if it wasn't the medicine? I gripped the glass tighter, taking in every detail. The rim was marked with lip prints, and I knew they were his. It was as if Raoul were still there, leaving me one last clue. I felt as if I looked too deeply, I would see not just the stain, but the very cause of his death. The silence of the kitchen was broken only by the sound of the faucet running, but in my mind, screams echoed. I sat at the table with the glass in my hands, examining it as if it were a rare jewel. The memory of the letter hidden in the workshop came flooding back. "Don't trust those who smile too much," Raoul had written. Had he sensed it? Was that glass silent proof of his distrust? My breathing became heavy, and I felt my hands trembling as much as my heart. I decided not to mention anything to my children that morning. I watched them eat, laughing falsely, while the cup remained with me, out of their sight. I was certain that if I left it on the sink, someone would rush to wash it and erase the stain like someone erasing a crime. The cup was no longer just an object. It was a silent testimony. In the following days, I noticed my children avoided using that cup. They preferred any other, plain glass, even plastic. But no one touched that one, the crystal one. It was as if they knew what it held and avoided it for fear of leaving a trace. This refusal, for me, was confirmation that something was hidden. Raoul had not died naturally. I considered taking the glass to a specialist, but I feared arousing suspicion too soon. I decided to hide it in a safe place, where not even they would think to look. My children's silence deepened every time I mentioned Raoul, and now the glass was my only bridge between doubt and truth. I felt it watching me, like an invisible guardian of what was yet to come. It was strange. The longer I stared at that crystal, the more memories surfaced. The last night Raoul drank from it, the heavy sigh, the distant gaze. He held my hand and said, "Don't forget to look closely, Lydia." Only now did I understand he wasn't referring to myself or my life, but to what he was leaving behind. The glass was a poisoned inheritance, and I needed to decipher it. The weight of the truth grew within me, as if every inch of that stain were Raoul's cry for justice. The silence of the house, the silence of the children. Everything seemed to converge on that seemingly harmless object. A crystal glass, transparent on the outside, but concealing a darkness beneath. This was no coincidence. It was a message. And there, that dawn, I swore to myself that I would discover what lay at the bottom of that glass. Not just stains, but poison, secrets, and betrayals. Raoul wouldn't be just another silent dead man, and I wouldn't be just a resigned widow. The crystal glass would be the first piece of a macabre puzzle, and I was ready to put it together, piece by piece. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially at a time when sunlight blended with the darkness of the night, creating a melancholy atmosphere. Upon opening the door, I found a middle-aged man with a worn hat on his head and a look that wavered between respect and mystery. He introduced himself as Augusto, Raoul's recent friend. My heart sank. I'd never heard that name before, but there was something in the firmness of his voice that made me believe he knew my husband better than he was letting on. I invited him in, even against the instinct that screamed not to. Augusto walked into the room with heavy steps, observing every detail as if he'd been there before. He sat in the armchair Raoul usually used, and that made me deeply uncomfortable. "Your husband was a man of secrets," he said, folding his hands. Those words echoed inside me like thunder. I'd already suspected it, but hearing it from a stranger sent chills down my spine. I offered him coffee to mask my nervousness, but I realized he wasn't there out of courtesy. His eyes roamed the house intently, landing on the bookshelves, the photographs, even the door to Raoul's office. "He trusted me," he continued, "and I know he left something for you." My entire body froze. Did he know about the letter and the crystal glass? Or was he just throwing words at the wind, hoping I'd betray myself? The silence that followed was suffocating. I decided to break it by asking how they met. Augusto explained that he worked in an antique machinery workshop and that Raoul had approached him months earlier, interested in specific parts. But his tone betrayed it. There was more to the story. He avoided details, averted his gaze, as if carefully choosing what to reveal and what not. As he spoke, I noticed sweat trickling discreetly down his forehead. It wasn't just heat. It was the weight of something unsaid. My hands trembled as I held my coffee cup, and I wondered if this man posed a danger. "Raoul was suspicious of many people," he said, almost whispering. "And it's not safe for you to trust everyone around you." Every word seemed chosen to sow doubt within me. Just then, one of my son's footsteps echoed down the hallway. He entered the room and stopped, surprised to see Augusto. The atmosphere grew heavy, almost palpable. My son forced a smile and coldly asked what the man was doing there. Augusto simply stood, adjusted his hat, and said, "I came to fulfill a promise." Then, without saying goodbye properly, he walked out the door, leaving a trail of unease. I stood frozen for a moment. My son's gaze was hard, almost accusatory. "Who was that man?" he asked, as if I'd made a mistake. I explained as simply as possible, but I could tell he didn't believe me. His eyes narrowed, as if hiding a fear or anger I couldn't decipher. That unexpected visit lit a silent fire within the house. That night, I couldn't sleep. Augusto's face came to my mind constantly, as did his words. "Raoul left something for you." Was he referring to the letter? The glass? Or was there more hidden that I hadn't yet discovered? I felt watched, as if with every move someone was waiting for me to reveal my secret. In the morning, I searched the armchair where Augusto had sat, as if hoping to find some clue he'd left behind. There was nothing visible, but the fabric seemed more worn than before, as if carrying an invisible weight. It was as if his presence had marked the house, like a shadow not easily erased. It was then that I understood. Augusto's visit was no coincidence. He came to warn me, but also to test me. His words were a riddle, and his presence a veiled threat. The mystery surrounding Raoul's death only deepened, and I knew that from then on, every visit, every silence, and every look carried secrets that could cost me dearly. It was a gray morning when I decided to open the old dresser in the guest room, where I kept forgotten objects. Rummaging through the drawers full of yellowed fabrics and useless papers, I found an envelope folded with exaggerated care. Upon opening it, I felt a pang in my chest. It was an old photo from when Raoul and I were still young, smiling alongside our young children. My heart warmed for a moment, but then shattered into 1,000 pieces upon noticing the cruel detail. The photo was torn right over Raoul's face. That cut wasn't casual. It was precise, sure, as if carrying anger and intention. I ran my fingers over the rough mark of the torn paper, and a chill ran down my spine. Who had done this? And more importantly, why? The portrait, which should have been a reminder of love and unity, had become a symbol of resentment and contempt. It was as if someone wanted to erase Raoul from the family's memory. I sat on the edge of the bed with the photograph in my hands, and my mind returned to a distant conversation. Days before he died, Raoul had said to me in a low voice, "The enemy isn't always out there, Lydia." Now, looking at that mutilated portrait, I realized that perhaps he already knew the threat came from within his own home. The terror in the paper was like a silent confession. I called the children into the room later and calmly asked if any of them remembered that photo. Their reactions varied. One looked away, another feigned indifference, and the third stood rigidly, like a statue. None admitted anything, but all revealed more than they would have liked through their looks. The silence, once again, screamed louder than words. I kept the photo with me, in my dress pocket, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to bear. With every step inside the house, I felt the paper stick to my body, as if reminding me that I could no longer trust anyone. It was strange. That portrait, once a source of joy, now made me walk as if I were carrying a disguised weapon. I couldn't sleep all night. I stared at the photograph in the dim light of the lamp, searching for details that might give me answers. I saw that the corners were creased, as if they had been handled many times. Whoever had done it didn't do it impulsively, but insistently. It was a repeated gesture of someone harboring hatred in their heart. I began to wonder, had Raoul also seen this torn photo at some point? Was that what made him so suspicious? Perhaps that portrait had been a warning, a silent declaration of war within our own home. The torn image seemed to whisper, "He doesn't belong here anymore." The next day, I hid the portrait under my mattress, tightly wrapped in a cloth. I couldn't leave it in plain sight, because I was sure someone would try to destroy it once and for all. It was proof, small but significant, that something rotten was growing between us. And I wouldn't let it disappear, not yet. As I walked through the house, I noticed one of my sons watching my every move, as if trying to guess what I was hiding. His gaze was cold, calculating, and made my stomach churn. It was at that moment that I realized it wasn't just paranoia. I was being watched, tested, measured in every gesture. The torn photograph was no longer just a memory of the past, but a cruel message from the present. It wasn't just Raoul's image that someone had tried to erase, but also his truth, his memory, and perhaps even the justice he deserved. And I, alone, would have to protect that small piece of paper as if it were the key to the entire mystery. It was dawn when I woke with the strange sensation that something was watching me. The silence in the house seemed heavier than ever, and even the ticking of the clock sounded like a war drum in my chest. I looked up at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just an illusion, but then I saw it, a shadow gliding down the hallway, long and silent, as if it had no body. My heart nearly stopped at that moment. I stood up slowly, my bare feet trying not to make a sound on the tiled floor. I opened the bedroom door just enough to peek out, and there stood the shadow, silhouetted by the faint moonlight streaming through the cracks in the window. I couldn't make out who it was, but I saw movement clearly. Someone was passing in front of my room, heading toward the living room. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I followed behind, even though my legs were shaking like green leaves. Each step felt like a risk, each creak of the wooden floor an announcement that I was there. When I reached the end of the hallway, I found only emptiness. The room was dark, but one detail made me freeze. The dresser drawer, where I had stored personal belongings, was ajar. I approached slowly, silently praying that my eyes were deceiving me. But they weren't. The clothes were disturbed, and the cloth I'd used to wrap the torn portrait was missing. I searched frantically and, with relief mixed with terror, found the portrait still there, but misplaced, as if someone had tried to take it and given up at the last minute. My heart was racing so hard I felt dizzy. Who had come in? One of my children? Someone from outside? Or even Augusto, that stranger who had appeared days before? Anything seemed possible, and that was the scariest part. The shadow wasn't just a figure in the hallway. It was a warning that I wasn't safe, even in my own home. I returned to my room, but didn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night. I sat on the edge of the bed, the portrait in my hands, as if it were my only shield against the unknown. The silence was now thick with invisible whispers, and I had the feeling that at any moment the shadow would return to take what it hadn't managed to take. In the morning, I feigned normalcy. I made coffee as usual, but I observed my children's every move. One of them yawned excessively, another avoided looking at me, and the third seemed overly nervous, fidgeting with his cup as if trying to hide something. I studied them silently, convinced the shadow of the night had a familiar face. I spent the entire day with my mind spinning. What if Raoul was right? If the enemy was truly inside the house, the portrait was proof that someone wanted to erase his memory. But who would dare watch me in the middle of the night? The question echoed like a hammer in my head, unanswered. Late that afternoon, I locked all the doors and hid the portrait in a new, even more secret place. But as I lay down to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my steps were already being calculated by invisible eyes. The hallway, once a simple passageway through the house, was now a dark abyss where fear lurked. And so I understood. The shadow in the hallway wasn't just a product of the night. It was the embodiment of hidden intentions, of the cursed secrets that loomed over my family. And I needed to prepare myself, because this was just the beginning of what was to come. The rain was falling heavily that night, drumming on the roof as if trying to wake the whole house. I was lying down, tossing and turning, when a soft, almost imperceptible sound caught my attention. It wasn't the wind, nor the sound of running water. It was voices, muffled whispers that seemed to be coming from the hallway. My heart raced, and for a moment I thought I was dreaming. But no, they were there, real, alive. I got up carefully, trying not to creak the floorboards. With each step, the whispers grew clearer, as if calling me. I approached the bedroom door and pressed my ear against the cool wood. The sound came from further ahead, from the next room. I recognized two distinct timbers, one deep, the other higher, speaking hurriedly, as if unwilling to be discovered. It was then that I heard the name that chilled me to the core. Raoul. That simple word, spoken in a conspiratorial tone, made my legs tremble.
It was impossible not to associate it.
My husband, who had died in such a strange way, was still the talk of my own house.
But why?
What else was there to talk about him, and most importantly, why in secret? I pressed myself closer to the door, my heart pounding, and I could make out stray phrases. She doesn't know yet. We need to be careful. No one can find out. The words were interrupted by the sound of the rain, but enough to send me into a panic. They were talking about me. I was the target, the deceived, the one kept in the dark. My first urge was to open the door and unmask them both. But the hand that reached for the doorknob trembled. I was afraid. Afraid of what I might see, afraid of the truths I might not be ready to hear. I stood there, paralyzed, torn between curiosity and my survival instinct. And in the end, I prevailed through silence. I decided not to open the door. I took a few steps back, taking a deep breath, and hid in the shadows of the hallway, watching. I watched as the door slowly opened and two figures emerged, one taller, the other shorter. They walked quickly toward the living room, unaware of my presence, their eyes fixed on their every move. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew. They were my own flesh and blood. My stomach churned, and tears welled up in my eyes. How could I bear the thought that my own children were plotting something in secret? The whisper behind the door wasn't just innocent chatter, it was a heavy, dangerous secret. And I was trapped in the worst position, that of a mother who must distrust her own child. I spent the rest of the night awake, trying to piece together the scattered words I'd heard. She still doesn't know. What exactly didn't I know? No one can find out. What were they hiding? Each sentence was like a dagger stuck in my chest, and the pain of not having answers was almost unbearable. The next morning, facing my children at the table, I could barely hide the tremor in my hands. They were acting normally, but now every smile seemed fake. Every word carried an invisible venom. I looked at them and saw only the reflection of those shadows whispering my name and Raoul's. It was at that moment that I decided, in the silence of my heart, that I could no longer be a mere spectator. The whisper behind the door would not be forgotten. I would write it down, save it, and wait for the right moment to confront it. Because if Raoul had truly been silenced, I would not let the same fate befall me. That day, the table was set impeccably, as if it were a normal ritual. Cutlery was lined, the tablecloth was clean, the dishes were carefully served. But I no longer saw just a meal. Every detail seemed like a disguised trap. My gaze darted from the food to my children's faces, and behind their hurried smiles, I saw something hidden. I put the first spoonful in my mouth and immediately noticed a bitter, strange taste, as if the food had been seasoned with something other than salt. It wasn't just my impression. The texture was different, heavier, and the taste lingered on my tongue. I swallowed with effort, but my throat burned as if warning me of an invisible danger. I looked at the glass of wine in front of me. Raoul always had a habit of having a glass with dinner, and I kept that tradition as a reminder. I brought it to my lips, but the smell repulsed me. There was a sour, almost metallic note that didn't match the drink I knew so well. My heart raced. I pretended to drink, wetting only the tip of my lip. Meanwhile, one of my sons watched me insistently, as if waiting for something. The detail didn't escape me. His eyes weren't on their own plates, but fixed on me, analyzing every gesture, every swallow. It was at that moment that the certainty struck me like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't paranoia. Something had been planted there. The memory of Raoul's letter, warning me not to trust, echoed in my mind like a scream. He already knew. He already foresaw that the betrayal wouldn't come from outside, but from within. And now, the threat was before me, served on a seemingly harmless plate. I put my fork down and smiled with effort, hiding it. I pretended to be satisfied and, between short sentences, pushed my plate forward. My children exchanged quick glances, as if saying something without words. This detail was what hurt me most. Their complicity was no longer innocent, it was the bond that put me at risk. I got up from the table, claiming I was tired. In my room, I closed the door and leaned my back against the wood, trying to control my breathing. My body was sweating coldly, but my mind was more alert than ever. Dinner was no longer a simple meal. It had become a silent battlefield where every bite could be my undoing. That night, I lay down with nothing to eat except a piece of dry bread I'd hurriedly hidden. My stomach growled, but fear was stronger than hunger. Every memory of the bitter taste made me think of Raoul, of how his sudden death might not have been natural. Perhaps he'd gone through exactly the same torment. I spent hours pondering how to act.
Report? Spy?
Escape? Everything seemed risky, but as certainty grew within me, I could no longer trust anyone at that table. The poison wasn't just in the food or the wine. It was in the intentions, the looks, the unspoken words. And so, that night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would no longer be a victim. The poison on the table might try to silence me, but I would learn to listen for the signs, to play the same game. Because if they wanted to see me weak, they would discover that distrust can transform an elderly woman into a watchful sentinel, ready to fight for the truth. Days after the poisoned dinner, with a bitter taste still in my throat, I decided to search the house for any clues Raoul might have left. The letter found in the workshop had already shown me he suspected something. So, if it was true that my husband sensed his own death, perhaps he had left more messages. Intuition guided me like a beacon in the midst of a storm. I started with the bookshelf, where Raoul kept his favorite books. I ran my hand over the dusty spines, pulling them out one by one. Between the pages of an old novel, I found the first envelope. My fingers trembled as I recognized Raoul's firm handwriting. My heart nearly leaped from my chest. Here was another of his voices from beyond death. I sat in the armchair, the letter in my hands, and took a deep breath before opening it. Raoul wrote that he suspected strange movements in the office, documents disappearing and reappearing, checks signed without his consent. He mentioned names. One of them made me choke. That of one of our own children. The doubt that had already been gnawing at me now had a terrible confirmation. I kept searching, as if following an invisible thread. In the nightstand drawer, I found another letter, folded with military precision. In it, Raoul said he could trust no one but me and asked me to be strong if anything happened. He spoke of poison, of underhanded plans, of an enemy within the house itself. The words were daggers, but also shields. The tears flowed uncontrollably. Raoul knew he would be silenced, and yet his concern was that I survive. I read every line and felt as if he were beside me, whispering advice in my ear. Pain mingled with indignation. How could our children have been so lost? At the back of the closet, behind old boxes of clothes, I found more envelopes. Some were already yellowed, as if Raoul had prepared them long ago. Each letter was a piece of a puzzle, hidden accounts, suspicious people coming and going from our lives, and even mentions of Augusto, the man who had come to visit me. Nothing was by chance. I kept all the letters in a metal box that I locked with a padlock. If I was being watched, I needed to protect that evidence as if I were guarding my own soul. As I closed the box, I had the distinct feeling that I was becoming Raoul's accomplice in his posthumous investigation. He was no longer there in body, but his mind shone through those pages. I also felt a new weight, responsibility. Now I wasn't just a grieving widow. I was the guardian of secrets that could cost me my life. Every letter I read was like a warning. Don't trust. Don't expose yourself. Watch. It was as if Raoul had planned to train me to resist the invisible poisons circulating within the house. That night, I tucked the box under my bed, but I barely slept. The sound of footsteps in the hallway, the creaking of the wood, everything seemed to signal that someone already suspected what I had in my hands. The fear was great, but even greater was the determination to honor what Raoul had left me, the truth. And so, between tears and courage, I understood that those letters weren't just warnings. They were maps, guides to a tortuous path I would have to walk alone. And although the loneliness was sharp, something inside me grew stronger. The certainty that, as long as I had those words with me, I would never truly be alone. The next morning, while tidying the kitchen, I found fresh ash in the trash. It was dark, clumps of it, almost stuck together, as if someone had tried to get rid of something in a hurry. I leaned in to take a closer look and noticed fragments of paper, the letters still visible, slightly blurred. My heart sank. Someone had burned a note inside the house, and they didn't want me to know. I picked up the pieces carefully, piecing them together like someone trying to piece together a corpse. Some passages were still legible. Don't trust her. The time is coming. My blood ran cold when I realized the note was about me. It was clear they were trying to erase evidence, but the fire couldn't completely destroy the truth. The smell of burning seemed to permeate the air, mixed with the aroma of coffee wafting from the living room. The whole house felt like it was breathing betrayal. That charred note told me my every move was being watched, that someone already knew about Raoul's letters, or at least suspected I'd discovered something. I held the pieces closer to the window's light and realized the handwriting wasn't Raoul's. It was recent, hurried, and bore the marks of a heavy hand. This wasn't just a message. It was a plan in motion. That burned piece of paper was like an echo of conspiracy, revealing that the danger wasn't just past, but present. I tucked the remains into an old book on the shelf, hiding them between the yellowed pages. No one would suspect anything there. As I closed the book, I felt a mixture of fear and anger. If they thought the fire would silence the truth, they were mistaken. What was left was enough to keep me alert and reinforce my suspicions. That afternoon, I sat alone on the porch, staring out at the empty backyard. The wind blew cold, but what chilled me most was the thought that someone, inside my own home, was in a hurry to erase me from history. I was no longer just a mother. I was a target, and my every move was followed by eyes that plotted in the darkness. I remembered Raoul, his last few weeks quieter, his suspicious gaze always on his children. Had he also found tickets like that? Had he tried to spare me by hiding the traces of betrayal? Or was this all part of the same plot they were now trying to cover with fire? The burned note became, for me, a symbol of a silent war. On one side, those who wanted to erase every trace. On the other, I, clinging to the pieces, fighting to preserve the memory and truth that Raoul left behind. The fire might consume the paper, but it wouldn't burn the certainty that had already taken hold within me. That night, I slept little. Every crack of wood sounded like matches striking, every shadow someone hiding secrets in the flames. Fear turned into vigil. I was no longer a hostage. I was a guardian of evidence, no matter how small. And that gave me the strength to resist. With the burned note tucked between the pages of the book, I swore to myself that no fire, no matter how strong, would destroy the truth Raoul and I shared. The enemy might try to hide their tracks, but now I was ready to follow through, reconstructing word by word what they were trying to erase. While cleaning Raoul's desk, I found a drawer that had always remained closed. It was sturdy, made of antique wood, with a small, rusty lock. I ran my fingers over it and felt as if Raoul had left another secret locked there, waiting for me. My heart was pounding, as if that drawer were a door to his past and my future. After some effort, I found the key in a jar of old coins, as if he had prepared this hiding place for me. I turned the key with trembling hands, and when the lock gave way, the sound echoed through the room like a snap in the silence. Inside was a worn black-covered notebook, the elastic band loosely holding together the yellowed pages. It was Raoul's diary. I held the diary to my chest before opening it, like someone embracing their own husband once again. The first few pages were filled with simple notes, dates, appointments, everyday memories. But as I turned the pages, the writing became denser, more nervous, as if he were writing in a hurry, under threat. The firm handwriting began to tremble, revealing his fear. Raoul described nights when he could hear his own children whispering in the hallway, spoke of strange smells in his food, of sudden dizziness that left him breathless. Each line was a knife in my chest. He was narrating the poisoning bit by bit, leaving written proof that his death was not the work of fate, but of treacherous hands. There were also names of outsiders, unknown to me, whom Raoul cited as accomplices or intermediaries. Among them, Augusto, the man who had unexpectedly appeared at my house, once again appeared. The diary connected everything: the strange visitor, the children's silence, the hidden letters, and even the burned note. It was a complete map of the conspiracy. On one of the pages, Raoul wrote something that took my breath away. "If I don't resist, Lydia needs to know. She's the only one who can put the pieces together. They'll try to silence my voice, but my words will protect her." I read these sentences aloud, as if they were promises from him spanning time. I closed my eyes and cried like I hadn't cried since the day of the funeral. It wasn't just longing, it was indignation. Raoul had died slowly, in front of everyone, and no one had reached out to help him. Now I held in my hands the proof of the crime, written in the very blood of his soul. I put the diary inside the same metal box where the letters were. I padlocked it and hid it again. The feeling of being watched grew, but along with it a new strength was born. I was no longer just a suspicious widow. I was a witness to a crime, with evidence guarded like treasure. As I lay in bed that night, the diary lay under my bed, and I, with my eyes open in the darkness, felt Raoul closer than ever. His voice echoed within me, telling me not to give up, not to let fear overcome me. I was the guardian of his last truth. And there, in the silence of my room, I promised him I would bring justice. That every word written in that diary would not be in vain. That, even with my frail hands and tired body, I would fight to the end to reveal to everyone who really killed Raoul. I was used to being suspicious of everyone, but that week something different happened. While walking through the square to clear my head, I ran into Dona Estela, an old neighbor, almost my age. She looked at me tenderly, but there was also concern in her eyes. "Lydia, we need to talk," she said in a low voice, almost a whisper. I felt an immediate chill. We sat on a wooden bench under the shade of a tree. Estela looked around before speaking, as if afraid of being overheard. Then she told me that, in the days before Raoul's death, she saw one of my sons going into different pharmacies, buying small bottles hidden inside his clothes. She didn't know what it was, but the behavior had struck her as suspicious. My heart pounded, and for a moment I felt my legs weaken. The memory of the bitter taste of the food came back like a slap in the face. Estela held my hand firmly. "You're not crazy, Lydia. Something's wrong, and you need to protect yourself." Her words were both a balm and a warning. I tearfully told her about the letters, the diary, and even the burned note. Estela listened silently, just squeezing my hand. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "You can't face this alone. Raoul knew they'd come after you, but now you have me." For the first time in weeks, I felt I wasn't completely alone. Estela revealed to me that Raoul, in confidence, had also left her messages. Short phrases during conversations at the gate, looks that asked for silence. He knew he could count on her if anything happened. Discovering this gave me a sense of hope. Raoul had woven an invisible safety net, and Estela was part of it. We walked home together, and each step felt lighter. There was still fear, yes, but now there was also complicity. At the gate, Estela said to me, "I'll help you keep watch. I have watchful eyes, and no one will suspect me. I'll observe their every move and report back to you." Her tone was firm, almost military, as if she were a sentry. That night, I slept differently. The hallways still felt menacing, the shadows still stretched across the walls, but inside I felt a sense of relief. Knowing that someone outside could also see through the plot gave me renewed strength. I was beginning to form my own field of resistance. Still, I couldn't help but think about the risk. Trusting someone could be dangerous. But Estela's gaze, clear and sincere, reminded me of my youth, when friendship was synonymous with loyalty. Perhaps Raoul had guided me to her as a final gift, as the strong arm I needed at that moment. I began to jot down, on loose sheets of paper, every detail I remembered from the conversations, letters, and diary, keeping copies in different places. Now, it wasn't just my memory that held the truth. If something happened to me, Estela would be able to continue the fight. This strategy gave me the feeling that we were one step ahead. And so, amidst grief and loneliness, I discovered an unexpected ally. Someone who carried with me the weight of trials, the fear of the days, and the hope of justice. Estela entered my life like a spark in a dark night, reminding me that even in the greatest betrayals, loyalty can blossom in the most unlikely places. With Estela's help, my attention became even sharper. I began to observe every corner of the house like someone examining a minefield. It was one cold morning, while tidying the pantry, that I found something that made my stomach churn, a small glass jar, hidden behind cans of preserves. The label was torn off, but the strong smell betrayed it was anything but harmless. I held the bottle with a cloth, avoiding direct contact. It was like holding death itself in a bottle. My heart raced. The memory of Raoul's letters, where he spoke of poison, came immediately to mind. Here was physical confirmation of everything I feared. It wasn't just suspicion, it was concrete proof that someone was trying to silence me. I took the vial to Estella, who paled at the sight. "This can't stay here, Lydia. If they find out you found it, your life is in danger." She suggested we hide it somewhere else, away from the house, so no one would know about the discovery. But I decided to keep it with me, locked in the metal box along with the letters and the diary. It was risky, but I needed to keep all the pieces together. That night, I could barely sleep. The bottle seemed to breathe inside the box, like a sleeping enemy ready to awaken. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the liquid dripping into a glass of wine, into a hot soup, slowly destroying my body as it had Raoul. The fear was suffocating, but it also kept me vigilant. The next day, I sat alone at the kitchen table and stared at the dishes. I remembered how many times Raoul had sat there, smiling, unaware that he was slowly being poisoned. Anger consumed me. It was unbearable to think that the love of a lifetime had been destroyed by the ambition of those we should call children. Estella advised me to contact the police, but how could I trust them? Without witnesses, they might accuse an old woman distraught with grief. I knew I needed to gather more evidence, bide my time. The bottle would be the final piece of the puzzle, but it wasn't ready to be handed over yet. First, I needed to be absolutely certain who was holding the reins of this conspiracy. I began to observe my children with a detective's eye. Every gesture, every word, every exchange of glances was analyzed as if it were part of a play. And the more I observed, the more I noticed signs. One of them avoided looking at me. Another whispered on the phone at odd hours. The poison wasn't just in the vial, it was embedded in their hearts. One night, while everyone was asleep, I opened the metal box again. I took out the vial and stared at it in the dim candlelight. The liquid seemed to move inside, as if it had a life of its own. I touched the cap and silently promised Raoul, "I won't let this destroy me. You are a victim, but I won't be." I put it back, tighter than ever. This small vial became my symbol of resistance. It reminded me of the fragility of life, but also of my mission. As long as it was in my hands, I controlled the narrative. The poison wouldn't destroy me. It would be the weapon to reveal to the world the truth they tried to hide in the shadows. And so, between fear and courage, I understood that each piece of evidence I found was also a sentence against them. Raoul could no longer speak, but I, with that bottle hidden away, had his voice within me. The silence of the house turned to waiting, and I knew the final confrontation was approaching. The silence in the house that night felt different, charged with a tension that couldn't be explained solely by the wind rattling the windows. There was something in the air, a dense energy that made me shiver. I was already accustomed to the solitude of the night, but this time the fear had a different flavor, that of a battle about to unfold. The children were home, gathered in the living room. Feigning indifference, I made some tea and discreetly observed the whispers, the quick glances, and the way they hid papers and cell phones as I passed. I felt my entire body freeze. It was as if everyone had already decided my fate and were just waiting for the right moment to strike me down. I tucked the vial of poison into my coat pocket, like someone carrying a dark amulet. I hadn't intended to use it, but I wanted to remind myself that the death they were plotting was now within my control. With each gulp of air, the decision grew stronger within me. It was time to confront. I entered the room uninvited, leaning firmly on my cane. Eyes turned to me, some with irritation, others with feigned surprise. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "I know exactly what you're up to. Raoul didn't die by accident, and I won't be next." The silence that followed was so heavy I could almost hear it breaking in the air. One of them tried to laugh, as if my words were the ravings of a disturbed old woman. But I placed the bottle on the table, and the sound of glass against wood echoed like a gunshot. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, looking at each face in turn. Their expressions changed, and the laughter died in their throats. The truth was laid bare before them. Eyes met between the brothers, and I sensed fear mixed with anger. The mask was beginning to slip. "You think you can silence me?" I continued, "but Raoul left evidence, letters, a diary. And now I have witnesses too. I'm no longer a helpless old woman." My voice trembled, but the strength of my indignation sustained me. One of them stood up abruptly, approaching as if to intimidate. Estella, who had entered silently through the back door, appeared at my side. "Take one more step and the police will be the ones hearing this now," she said firmly, holding a small recorder. Shock was evident on their faces. Raoul wasn't alone, and neither was I. The confrontation didn't end in shouting, but in silence. A poisoned, heavy silence that said more than words. They knew they were surrounded, that their plans had been discovered. For the first time, I saw fear in the eyes of the one who had always tried to control me. It was the beginning of a turning point. I went to my room with my heart racing, but with the feeling of having won a battle. The war wasn't yet won, but that night, for the first time, I felt Raoul smiling down on me from above. The poison they planned against me was now stored as proof of their own betrayal. And so, on that night of confrontation, I understood that my fight was no longer just for survival. It was for the memory of the man I loved, for the justice he deserved, and for the courage I needed to carry until the end. My fate was sealed, and I was ready for whatever came. The days following the confrontation were heavy as lead. The house seemed to breathe anger and resentment, and I walked the halls as if crossing a battlefield. But something was different. The mask had slipped. They knew I knew the truth, and I knew fear now resided in their hearts. Then, one afternoon, while rummaging through Raoul's room again, I found a folder hidden in the back of the closet. Inside were carefully organized papers, bank statements, copies of deeds, and even receipts for suspicious purchases. With each page turned, the plot unraveled before my eyes. Raoul had gathered evidence that our children were involved in shady dealings, laundering money and embezzling family assets. But the hardest blow came at the end of the file, a medical examination of Raoul, performed just a few months before his death. It was written in clear letters that he had no serious illness, no problem that could explain his sudden death. My heart stopped for a moment. It was confirmation of what I already knew, but now with a seal and signature. With trembling hands, I brought the document to Estella. She read it silently, her eyes welling up. "They killed their own father, Lydia. It wasn't just greed. It was cruelty. And now they're trying to do the same to you." I felt a mixture of pain and fury invading my chest, but also a strange calm. The truth, finally, was all before me. That night, I gathered the children in the living room once more. I placed the folder on the table and, unfazed, said, "Everything you hid, Raoul already knew. You thought you'd destroy the evidence, but he was smarter. It's all here." The silence was absolute. I could hear their heavy breathing, the grinding of their teeth, the pent-up hatred. One of them tried to snatch the folder from the table, but I held it firmly. "If you do anything to me, these papers will be in the hands of the police tomorrow morning," I warned. Estella, beside me, showed the recorder again, proving that nothing would remain secret. For the first time, I saw tears in one of their eyes. Maybe it was regret. Maybe just fear of losing everything. The masks shattered there. None of them denied it. None tried to feign innocence. The silence confirmed more than any words. They knew they had been unmasked, and I knew that Raoul had somehow prevailed even after death. His voice, preserved in letters, diaries, and evidence, now echoed through me. I felt a strength grow within my chest, greater than fear. You took the love of my life from me, but you will not take away my dignity, nor my right to the truth. Justice will be served, whether by the law of man or by the hand of God." My voice echoed through the room, and for a moment, everyone lowered their eyes, unable to look at me. That night, I closed the folder and put it away with the diary, the letters, and the vial of poison. The puzzle was complete. The pieces fit together, painting a picture of a family destroyed by ambition and hatred. Raoul had been a victim, but his memory would be my battle flag. And so, before them, I understood that the final revelation wasn't just about the crime.
It was also about me.
I was no longer the same fragile, silenced woman. I was the guardian of the truth, Raoul's voice, the witness to his pain, and the herald of his justice. When I handed over the evidence to the authorities, I felt as if a decades-long weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't easy. The fear of retaliation still haunted me, but the folder containing Raoul's documents, the diary, the letters, and even the vial of poison spoke louder than any lie. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a witness to the truth. The sons were called to testify. I saw the arrogance in their eyes dissolve into despair when confronted with the papers and recordings. The ambition that had driven them to plot against their own father now transformed into invisible chains, dragging them to the justice of men. It was painful to see my blood sitting before judges, but it was necessary. In that courtroom, I felt Raoul's presence. Every word the judge spoke seemed to echo like an answer to the prayers I'd prayed through sleepless nights. The truth he'd tried to preserve in life now stood before everyone. When I heard the sentence, I cried, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Finally, justice was beginning to be served. Estella was by my side the whole time, holding my hand like a sister. Without her, I might not have had the strength to endure each revelation, each hateful look, each reminder that evil had been born within my own home. She became the unexpected angel that Raoul had somehow already placed in my path. Returning home after the trial was strange. The silence remained, but it was no longer the same. It was a silence of peace, of closure. I walked through the rooms and felt Raoul's presence in every corner, no longer as pain, but as a sweet longing. He had not left in vain. His life and his death had become a lesson and strength. So I decided to start over. I sold the big house, with its heavy memories, and moved into a smaller, but light-filled place. I took with me only the essentials, a few photos, the now-closed diary, and the certainty that I had accomplished my mission. I no longer needed the weight of the old walls to carry Raoul inside me. The days became lighter. I discovered pleasure in small things, growing flowers on the balcony, writing my memoirs in simple notebooks, drinking coffee in silence without fear of poison. Each daily gesture was a victory, a way to celebrate the life that still coursed through my veins. My grandchildren, far removed from their parents' mistakes, began visiting me. In them, I found the radiance of innocence and the hope of a different future. With them, I could laugh again, tell stories about my grandfather, and teach that true love is built on honesty. It was like planting new seeds in renewed soil. Sometimes at night, I still talk to Raoul in my mind. I thank him for leaving me clues, for trusting me even without knowing if I would have the courage. And I pray that, wherever you are, you may rest in peace knowing that your truth was not buried with your body. It lives within me, in every line I write, in every breath I take. Today, older and more serene, I understand that justice isn't just punishment. It's also liberation. Freedom to move forward without fear, to honor the memory of those I loved, and to live my final years in peace. Raoul is gone, but he left within me the flame that lights my new beginning. And I, Lydia, live on stronger than ever. After more than 40 years of marriage, Lydia believed Raoul's death was just another tragedy of fate. But a cryptic note, found at the wake, opened the doors to a mystery that would transform her life into a battlefield. Among hidden letters, locked diaries, and even a vial of poison, the elderly woman discovered that the enemy was within her own home. Her children, driven by greed, had turned against their own father, and now they were plotting against her. The silence of the corridors became a scream, the shadows became threats, and every meal carried the taste of fear. But, strengthened by the memory of her husband and Estella's unexpected help, Lydia found the courage to face her tormentors. The confrontation was inevitable. Evidence revealed, mask shattered, and the certainty that Raoul had not left in vain. Through tears, courage, and painful revelations, Lydia discovered that justice isn't just punishment, but also liberation. Her story is a testament to resilience, love, and dignity, showing that even amid betrayal and grief, it's possible to start over. A narrative of suspense, emotion, and truth, told in the intimate voice of a woman who transformed pain into strength and her husband's memory into justice.